Well, a very good morning to you. It's Tuesday, October 4th, 2022. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for being with us. Once again, this is AM Prime on this day. Let's tell you what's happening this morning. Of course, we take you around the region. We have several stops to make. We're talking with Dr. Radhika Mahes in a little bit from now about what she says is the non-inclusiveness of the education system in Trinidad and Tobago, and she's speaking as someone who's a supporter of the people suffering with autism in Trinidad and Tobago. That's the organization, and how the education system does not necessarily prepare for them. We're going to get to our first discussion, however, with former Minister of Finance in the PNM administration back in the early 2000s, Karen Eunice Teixeira. She has come out as challenging for the position of political leader of the party. She's going up against the incumbent, Dr. Keith Rowley. She says, as far as she's concerned, they are friends. She says he's solid in some respects, but that as a political leader, he has failed in her assessment of him. She's going to challenge for that position. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Andy. Good morning to your viewers. And got me up early this morning and ready.
Well, I think thanks for coming out, to use a term that is applicable in this sense. I think there were people for some time wondering, well, where you were coming from in the way that you were sort of critically objective, let me say, about what is happening in the government and what is happening in the PNM. At what point you made the decision that this is what you wanted to do?
Okay, so first of all, I don't know if I would use the word that the Prime Minister and I are friends. I think he would be as surprised as I am for you to use that word, but we certainly are not enemies, and certainly, whilst we were colleagues in government, we certainly enjoyed a very positive relationship as a cabinet colleague. There's no question about that, except towards the end, and we know how it unfolded. What made me make the decision? You're right, you talked about critical objectivity. I'm glad that you framed it that way, because I thought that's what I was doing. And I was writing a number of articles, some of which I wrote really with the intention initially of, maybe giving suggestions to the government that, for example, the Ministry of Tourism has become Ministry of Tourism and Culture and Arts. And I had always advocated for cultural tourism and other areas. And then the more I did more deep diving, as you might look at it, and the more I did research, the more I saw the many failings of the government in a way that I felt I could not remain silent. And I believe that if this current leadership remains in place, because leadership is what it's all about. We don't fool ourselves. That's what it is. Remains in place. We already going down a negative trajectory, and it will continue like that to a point of despair and hopelessness, which many, many people have expressed to me privately or on text, and you might be surprised who they are.
Yeah, you're talking about in this period, yeah, but you say in one of these articles heralding your decision that when you first got involved in the politics and was in the government and was in the party, you said he was one of the first people to welcome you in the PNM ranks in 2007 and gave you considerable support when you considered yourself a political neophyte.
Yeah, so that is why, but I mean, using the word friends, I think that's a very strong word to use. I don't know how many friends I do have, or do you, that I would use such strong language. What I wanted to convey was that as a colleague in the political arena, and a neophyte, as I said, which I was, he was one of the few, because remember, I had been given the portfolio of Minister of Finance, and I'm sure many of my cabinet colleagues, understandably, perhaps if I were in their position, I might have felt the same way. Where did she come from? What experience does she have? So while they might have silently felt that way and could not express it, at least not to me or to the Prime Minister, or maybe they did, I don't know. He certainly did not give me that impression that he felt that way about my appointment.
Yeah, and you're saying whatever differences there may be, it's very professional. There's nothing personal between you and him.
No. The only time I can say, and then again I will say I was a little taken aback, but I was taken aback. I'll be frank with you, because I kept out. First of all, I was new in the parliament, in the cabinet. Secondly, you know, their relationships and things that you are not privy to. So, you know, you just keep your laser focus and do what you were required to do as the appointee of the Prime Minister, and hopefully not to fail him. So I really did not, and I was not brought into it actually. Even when there was this speculation about who was in that meeting that said that he behaved like, you know, however they expressed it, I was at the World Bank. And so the only time I really felt it was a little personal and a little harsh and I was taken aback was with the property tax. The attack was so virulent, in my opinion, and it was at me because he was directing his comments to me with regards to the property tax and accusing me then and the government of misleading the nation by saying that the property tax was not a reform initiative, but was only about collecting money, and that was far from the truth. And I was really taken aback as a member, backbencher though he was. Maybe he was protecting the constituency of which he was the MP, and it is, as we know, as a constituency made up with people that they are poor, but there are a lot of wealthy people there. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but that took me aback. That took me back.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is very positive about this is that, so he's on record as having challenged for the leadership of the party under Mr. Manning. I was sort of in the center of that. I'm giving him a lot of space to talk and articulate his position, so that he ought to, and he and his supporters ought to find no difficulty or no room to criticize you for challenging him. I think that is.
Well, yes, I think I think we've gone through that part, because that is what, and unfortunately was, you know, I understand you have loyalties for various reasons, and you'd have to forgive me if I come across as a cynic, but it's not without a very good reason, and I understand it too. It's not without good reason, and I do understand it. Many times people take positions because they don't want to lose their job. They don't want to lose a consultancy. They don't want to lose a directorship. They don't want to lose a chairmanship. They don't want to get the appointment as senator removed. They don't want to become a backbencher. And I can tell you, based on examples that I know personally, when you fall out of favor, unless you are financially secure enough, you know, this saying is you suck salt is a very true thing, because I've seen some of my former colleagues suffer, and they have suffered tremendously because it seems, in my view, a deliberate strategy to ensure that they could not find a job. Now, I'm not saying that other administrations and other governments are not guilty of doing the same thing, but it's a very sad and unfortunate thing. And so some of them, in my respectful opinion, are forced, are compelled to take what they are given in order to at least have a salary, and in order at least to find something, because without it, it's not just that some of them are quite qualified, but they are blacklisted, and it's really a hard thing. Some have to come out of the country. I left for Barbados. I didn't wait. When I left Barbados and started teaching, I didn't wait to find out. But I saw many of my colleagues having to take back their cars because they couldn't even afford to make the payments on their cars, having to have their families support them, having to be there as we speak, still unable to find a job. And some of them who may be in the cabinet itself right now, being there because they simply were blacklisted and could not find a job, no matter how qualified. And that does not speak well of the Prime Minister, because it has to come from his instructions. No one can be bold enough to go against him, so that it speaks very poorly of the Prime Minister, that people feel so disenfranchised. And that is why I will conclude on this point. That is why I think that we don't know how many people sitting in that very cabinet would like to see him go. We don't know how many of his directors and many of those people would like to see him go. Certainly the groundswell up to yesterday, somebody does my tile route, and we talk all the time. Said to Mrs. Shera, you won't believe the unhappiness, the disappointment, at least, you know, the man in the street feels with his government. So I think he is aware, and I think it would not be unfair to say that people are are very much disappointed with him and feel he has not lived up to what the PNM is supposed to be about, if you look at its aims and objectives. And I think people feel that he is at the service of a small percentage of people in this country who really do not bring value back as they should to the development of our country.
What would you say, if you were to offer your own comments on that, what would you say are some of the indications of that? Because he is accused of favoring friends and financiers and associates and so on.
Right, exactly. So what you would say, you know, one thing about the government, the PNM, they are more finessed, they're more, they're not brash and in your face. So I think they tend not to do things in a way that people can say, it's obvious you're financing that, you're obvious you're you're looking out for your friends. So I could use some examples. The examples I would use is the policies and procedures. For example, the public-private partnership. On the face of it, it seems a good thing. If you look at a central bank report, I actually got a call from someone who is in the construction industry. I got the impression they wanted to sue me, but then I said you should go and read the central bank article, and that was the end of that story. But the point that was being made is that a lot of the public-private partnership, you have to come with money. A lot of the public-private partnership, especially in housing, you have got to have land. These people are living on rent. The procurement legislation, and up to now, I would love to see what do they mean in Section 7 when they talk about private-public partnership, including local and foreign companies, and also what they mean with the financial contracts, which include construction contracts. Because if you read the 2008 document prepared by the State Enterprise Division of the Ministry of Finance, those things that build, operate, lease, and transfer, those are considered to be financial transactions. Who at the lower end can ever put their heart in the ring for that? And I hope Steve Alvarez, I've used him a few times as an example. He said when they did the Moruga Fishing Depot, the cost of tendering document was $10,000. Who in those communities has $10,000? So they didn't tender, and the award was given to a construction company. Didn't name it. Where all the workers did not come from the surrounding areas of Grand Chimay, etc., but came from outside. We also can look, so the procurement is a good example. The watered down version of the Revenue Authority, which really gives it no teeth, and we look also at the Gambling Commission, which we all know is part of money laundering. And if you will recognize something, all three have not been fully proclaimed. And what is most important is the regulation. And it's been around a long time. Since they came in at the end of 2015, which is laughable in a way, January 16, the minister said he was ready with property tax. And he may have said that because the Property Tax Act had been passed while I was there. And we actually had the bills to send out, but the Prime Minister at the time said, hold your hands on that. And also we look at also that Chinese company. What are you doing taking on the role of Minister of Housing for 8 months, sending the Minister of Housing to tourism, staying there for 8 months, during which time what they call it, not a term of framework agreement is signed, which is never revealed until the JCC, through the Freedom of Information, eventually gets you to reveal it and find out that it was something that was so much against the national interest that it had to be scuttled, and the Prime Minister claimed ignorance about it. So there are so many, we look at this closed Lake Asphalt, it's a ward of the state. If you look at the information from the central bank, I know they get it from CSO, negative 56%, because bitumen, which is what the refinery produced, which is what allowed us to repair our roads, was not being produced. And yet this government comes to you, allows the roads to get to the state where no one can ignore the state of the roads, and then talking about they forming a company. That alone makes you frightened when you hear them say that. You're forming a company to fix something that you're allowed to generate. And you're not being honest and saying it's because you don't have bitumen, and you don't have bitumen because you closed down a refinery. You closed down a refinery for 4 years now, no plan. it is just they're rusting. And as it comes to the production of gas, you can't trust what they say. Every single year, as another one of your colleagues would have pointed out, every year he gets his production numbers wrong, and that's not good, because you're using that for revenue, you're using that for the fiscal deficit every single year, and by at least 1 million, I don't know the language, but at least 1 million MMBTU per day. How could you be getting it so wrong every year? How could you be doing that? And when you look finally in terms of growth, real GDP, which they use this year, which means you're looking at the impact of inflation on your goods and services that produce, and goods and services we produce with energy products. You look at Barbados. I hate you to mention Barbados, but it's true. Barbados growth from negative 14% when the rest of the world except Ghana was doing well, now has real GDP. There's 9 or 10% real GDP in 2022. Similarly, Jamaica 6.4%. What are they doing where their economies are reliant on tourism? And we have an energy economy because we're importing 80% of our food, allowing all these international franchises to operate. Why? Why are you allowing that?
Yeah, and is it not that in our case, so we are further up the ladder, so that improvement would be sort of more constrained, but they have a longer a gap to catch up on us, so 8 or 9% for them.
Well, whatever the constraints are, what it says is, why is it that except for 1 year, 2019, since they've got 0.1% growth, every year was negative growth. And why is it that you cannot blame COVID for 15, 16, 17, 18, 19? You cannot do that. And certainly at the end, by quarter 2 of 2021 and going forward, you cannot be blaming COVID. Now, in fairness to the government, because I've heard this criticism about the government not incentivizing a deep water round, and the government having not done that in how many years? Obviously, they're looking at
a bid round, a deep water bid round. Yeah.
Yes. And they got a poor response because these shareholders are international, and we're not for the Ukraine war and the Russian war, which is something we have no control over. Prices of oil and natural gas will be very, very depressed as it is, But in all fairness, when I read one of the minister's explanations, which I think made sense, he said the reason why. He said, we made no money. He said the grass was growing and the cow was starving because the previous administration had almost given them a tax holiday, except for payment of royalties. So all the equivalent of corporation tax, they call it petroleum profit taxes, and a number of other taxes were waived. And the reason it was waived was incentivized, because they said they were taking risks. And in order to take the risk, you've got to give them that, the young people might say, give them the blight.
Yeah,
but
and it was a period in which energy prices across the board had slumped.
And this is the thing. You're looking at oil. That's a good example. I mean, okay, you ask me if I was Minister of Finance, I would never have put oil at $90, because you always have to give yourself some $92. I always have to give yourself wiggle room for the mid-year review, because the ministries that want things that you can't give them because you have to wait. And you look at the price of oil, it has consistently, even though it was in the hundreds, by the time he read the budget and as he's going along, you're seeing those prices staying in the 70, 80 something dollars per barrel price range. And you have to understand that the so-called big countries are not going to be held to ransom by other superpowers like Russia or China. You also have to understand that the pipeline gas, it's LNG is the focus, and that's one thing we have over nearly every country. We have the platforms and we have the ships. But then again, the Minister of Energy comes and says train one, going on CNN.
I want to ask you about what you describe about his leadership, because I want to refer to something that was said to him very early in the day when he became Prime Minister. Denise Deming, who for all intents and purposes, was an associate in positive terms with him and with the party. And she said that that his legacy can't be simply that he became prime minister. And she was calling on him to see some action and see some leadership in particular directors. Probably it hasn't shown face yet, but we will take that up on the other side. We will take a break and come back. Stay with us. We're talking with Karen Nunez Teixeira, has declared her intention to contest the political leadership of the People's National Movement against the incumbent Prime Minister Dr. Rowley. Stay with us.
In a hurry, check those guys' hardware. 42 Front Street, Woodbrook. Call 750-7244. Open Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Sundays and public holidays at 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit?
Yes.
What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
I'm here with Andrew Lewis, sailor. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
The most beautiful thing about sailing, in my opinion, is it's where it was, originated from. It was a form of transport that was allowing people to connect different parts of the planet. And sailing today has become many different ways of life, but I have chosen the pathway of the Olympic Games.
For women to feel confident, we have to feel sexy. That doesn't mean outward appearance. It could be a mental state, it could be a physical state, it could be an emotional state. And if you choose to be liberal and if you choose to be conservative, that is up to you. I just give you the space to choose whatever you want to do.
What's up, Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Welcome back to the program. Let me just quote something from a newspaper article here with today's date on it. If I were a cabinet minister, I would be shivering in my boots because he's intimidating. I think he believes because he made it as a poor black young man from a single parent home, I think he seems to be intolerant of those who have not done it. Karen Nunez Teixeira being quoted in this piece here. He cannot look at the circumstances we see in the urban communities where there is a recruitment drive among the vulnerable young men and women who see no way out of their poverty except to be accomplices in what is an underground economy. She's referring to the leadership of the government and the ruling party, the People's National Movement, by the current incumbent, Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley. On this basis and other bases, she's decided to challenge for that position, political leader of the PNM. Let's talk a little bit about some of that.
I think that had a lot to do with my decision, and I certainly I'm not an advocate of, first of all, there's good and bad in every group. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm romanticizing those who are at the lower spectrum, which make up the vast majority of the country. What I do know is you need opportunity, and that's what America is built on. That is what the Concordat did for so many of our people who would otherwise not have an education were it not for the Concordat. And I've always said that the very next day they had a picture of Dr. Eric Williams again alongside Hitler, because the denominationals were not happy that they had to have most seats at the table. But what I will say is that the classic example would be the scrap iron metal issue. you shut it down and then give subsidies. I mean, is that what you want to say? They're living on this sort of dependency, but are you not creating it? And I'll use one example before I say what I think should be done. It reminded me of, and it's nothing, I think anybody did a little bit of history, even if they didn't, they must have heard about the palliative Versailles, where the things had gotten just, I mean, I visited there, and I mean, you have to see it to believe the ostentatiousness of the wealth, the vulgarity of the wealth. I mean, it is amazing. And there are drawings of people sitting outside the gates with bare clothing, with their children suckling and unable to feed them. And the famous statement, which may or may not have been made by her, but certainly has been attributed to her, let them eat cake. So what that means is that has always been used as a carrion call for the insensitivity and the lack of being out of touch with the people. And you had a monarchy. We don't have that. We have what is called democracy.
Parliamentary democracy, yes.
Parliamentary democracy. And when you see a prime minister, I mean, Faraz Al-Rawi's prime minister tried to clean it up a little bit, but a little too late because it came from the prime minister, not a junior minister. When he can tell people the fuel problem, well, what you have to do now is go different time. If you want to be out on the road doing anything, who you have to blame for that? That's what you say. Let them eat cake. When they say, go on a bicycle, while they're driving multi-million-dollar cars, you go and drive on a bicycle. What? Food? But you use a cold pot. Shamfa cut of cheese was shameful because I saw it in the day. It was true. I forgot about it. $59,000 in roaming charges. Yes, I believe it was not intentional. I believe her. But my God, you coming to talk about, if you came from poverty, which you all like to tell us about, the poverty that you came from, shouldn't you then understand that a lot of the reason why so many are not there is because of lack of opportunity? And it's what I call bias confirmation. I said this on another show, and I truly believe it. Because I have taught many students who come from those call areas. And in fact, one of them applied for a job in one of the banks. And she was afraid, she had used her actual address, which was in Laventille. And the person who had to do the hiring called me up and said, she's from here. I said, yes, but I can tell you she's a very good person. And the person, she eventually, I was called and told that, yes, I was right. So what I wanted to say, there's something called bias confirmation. And if you are living in Laventille and Mova, which is not just made up of bandits, there are a lot of people who work as nurses, who work as teachers, who work as policemen, who go out there every day and struggle to make sure their children have a good at least a meal and get an education. I was told by a friend of mine who worked on the port. She said, Karen, you will be surprised. You see all those secretaries and all those men that working on the port, every one of them have their children in university. You know how many of them children are dentists, doctors, but they don't come back home. They stay abroad, right? So what my point about bias confirmation is this, is you can be living in those areas. And I'm not saying there isn't gangs, which we know what has caused it. Why don't you deal with the cause instead of the symptom? And they can have 40, 50 families, houses on that street. And of those 50 houses, you may have 3 households where they are bad boys. Everybody in the street afraid of them. Everybody saying stay away from them. Everybody trying to live a good life. But then there's a shootout. All of them on that street, everybody gets labeled as if they are thieves and they don't have any ambition. And it is so, so unfair to them. So what I am saying is that the government has to take responsibility for that. And I just want to say, there are 2 theories of economics. I'm not an economist, but certainly we have to understand that we came from a population. Our population at that time was about 600-something thousand, very small at the time. But a population of uneducated, illiterate, who didn't even have school even, who didn't 5 years school, tertiary education. They left us and ran away for us to try and work it out. And I think we've done a pretty good job given the fact that we were a small group of uneducated people coming from different parts of the world and trying to make something of ourselves. So when the government deals with the situation along the East-West corridor, it cannot be to have people on subsidies, because when you do that, there's no coming out of it. I think on
the other side of that, the PNM takes a lot of credit for what you just said, moving the country from where it was just
and I'm glad you say the PNM. I'm glad you say the PNM, and this is why we're talking about the leadership. This is why our discussion is about the leadership, and that is why I'm challenging the leadership, because I believe in the PNM, and I believe that the PNM, Point Lisa's industrial estate, which was Eric Williams. Really was not our local private sector, which you always talk this private sector. Oh, they're talking about LNG, foreign investors, and Patrick Manning. So of course, education. A lot of the opening up in education, which I think needed to be, you needed to tailor it and rationalize it. No question about it. But there was at that time the thinking was, let's just ramp it up and get it as simple, and then we can sit down and rationalize it. So there's no question with COTA, SCOSA, UTT, Arthur Lockjack, MIC, and all those institutions, we have done well. But he cannot take credit for any of that. What he can take credit for is not doing anything for people to take them out of their poverty.
All right, we're gonna have to adjourn for the time being, but I want to get you on the point you make that you've spoken with a lot of people in the party before you made this decision. They are now, even though some of them may be intimidated for one reason or the other, you said, but they are now promising to vote for you in these elections, in this election.
Okay, so when you use the word party, I know you cannot mean the ones that like the chief secretary and the different appointments
people in the executive the and so on.
Yes, the executive, because I wouldn't speak to them and they wouldn't speak to me. I would not encourage them to, because I don't think they want to get themselves in trouble. But I have gotten so many calls.
From the general membership, from people in the general membership.
Absolutely, and from people you might be surprised. They just say to me, the one thing everybody tells me, which gets me a little concerned, is you have to be careful, huh? It takes a lot of courage. And I know they don't mean courage in a sense of you're going up against Dr. Rowley, which in itself can be intimidated if you want to be intimidated, which I am not. But they mean it in the terms of really, which says where this country has gotten to, that people tell you that, nearly everyone has said it to me or written it to me. It means that look out for your life. Now, if a country could reach that point that people genuinely feel from all walks of life, from the top, could tell you things like that, that in itself tells a tale of where we have reached. That people feel that if you go up, you have to watch out for your life. I mean, how could Trinidad and Tobago have reached that point? And that in itself tells you that you need a change, because for my challenge in leadership is clearly there are people who feel that they need to keep him there. And then you have to ask yourself, why do they need to keep him there? And then you have to ask yourself, the ones that need to keep him there, why do people feel that they're the ones that are a danger to me? Now, that's not saying that he said it. I'm saying that is the consensus of opinion. Yeah. And the other thing is people just say, we need a change because we cannot go on like this. The middle class is almost disappeared.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much. There's much time more for us to have other editions of this discussion. But let me wish you all the luck as you go forward on this campaign.
Well, Andy, thank you very much. And I think you're an excellent host. You're an excellent interviewer, because you do ask the difficult questions, and therefore you test the person's mettle, hopefully. And I appreciate the questions you asked me, and I hope I have inspired people. Let me say this, to register to vote for internal elections, because if you want change in the government, and not the party, but in the leadership of the party, it will not happen unless you register to vote as a member of the party. And therefore, if you don't do that, don't worry to complain.
Thank you very much. We will continue to discuss
this. Thank you very much.
Karen Eunice Teixeira. We will take a break. We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
In a hurry, check those guys' hardware. 42 Front Street, Woodbrook. Call 750-7244. Open Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Sundays and public holidays at 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide. But do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport. October 3rd to October 23rd, with replays on October 24th. It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
Saturday, November 5th, Shore Park, Tobago. It's Million Laughs Caribbean Comedy Commerce, the mega laugh festival to end the Tobago Carnival season, featuring Tobago's finest in folklore and musical entertainment, together with some of the Caribbean's top comedians, Larry Joseph, Daryl the Saint Mendoza, Dolores, Alan the Entertainer, Handsome Sun, Mako Media, and more. Get your ticket specials available on Island E-Tickets and various outlets nationwide, or visit the Million Laughs handles for more info. It's Comedy Commerce in Tobago, a wee kind of commerce.
Welcome back to the program. Let's just give you some updates here, or an update from a piece of writing that appeared in the newspapers yesterday, one of the newspapers. Our education system is now modern, inclusive, accessible, and relevant, and broadly meets the development needs of the country. That's a quote. And it said the words were issued by the Minister of Finance, Kolamimbe, in his presentation of the budget 2023. These words show the extent to which politicians are far removed from the reality which exists in Trinidad and Tobago. If the minister truly believes this, if politicians in Trinidad and Tobago truly believe this, then there's definitely no hope for special needs children in this country. And that was the beginning of a piece in the papers yesterday by Dr. Radhika Mahes, and she's the founder and director of an organization called Support Autism Trinidad and Tobago. And she's saying, as it's currently constructed and hoisted, there's no place in the education system for people with special needs, such as children with autism. Dr. Mahes is our guest. Good to see you.
Good morning.
All right, so let's take it from there. And you went into to talk about breaking down the statement in relation to special needs education. And there's nothing modern about the education of children with special needs in our country. Take it up from there.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, we have been advocating for the inclusion of children with autism and special needs in general at a national level. And we have found over the last few years that there are so many challenges of educating a child on the autism spectrum. The education system, as I said in that article, the education system is neither modern, nor inclusive, nor accessible for many children with autism. In fact, there are quite a lot of children who are registered members of Support Autism TNT who are not attending a school, have never attended a school, or have not been attending a school for quite a few years, because the school system, our public school system, do not cater to their needs, their special needs. And as I said in that article, we expect our system is all geared towards making children normal, what we conceive as normal. And I use the word normal in inverted commas. So unless a child can sit for a long period of time at a desk and do work, then they are seen as, if they can't do that, they're seen as hardened, they're seen as disruptive, and the entire system is not geared towards catering for them. So that's one of the main problems that we've had. The second problem that we've had is actually getting children enrolled in school. That's why it's not accessible to many children. So many of our kids have been turned away. Parents are trying to find schools for their children, and they'll call and say, well, I took my child to the school, and the principal said that he don't have any special needs teachers. He doesn't have enough teachers to deal with the child. The teachers don't know about children with special needs. So many of the children are actually turned away from the school. Then those who are at a level where they can attend the school and are fortunate enough to get into a school, they apply for teacher's aid, and many of them have been waiting for years to get a teacher's aid. So at all levels, our system is very flawed when it comes to inclusive education. That said, we do have an inclusive education policy. We have had an inclusive education policy since 2009, but that is not a very effective policy. If it was, then we would not have so many children at home waiting to get into schools or waiting for teacher's aid. We will not have teachers calling every day, parents calling every day trying to find out if we could recommend a private school for their children, if we know any school where the children will be safe and will be comfortable and will be taught at their level of development.
So what is that sort of, you say the policy itself, but the policy is something on paper. You're saying the policy speaks to inclusiveness and evenness and so on, but the practice is yet to catch up.
So yes, the policy is there in paper. It's not properly implemented, if it's implemented at all. I know that a few years ago, before COVID, there were attempts to make some of the schools, model schools where we had started implementing the policy. We have not heard anything about that from the ministry since the last few years, so I don't know if it is still being implemented at any level in any school. It is something that is very quiet from the ministry's side. But yes, there is a policy in writing. In theory, we do have a very inclusive system in theory. It all looks nice on paper. In practice, it's almost non-existent.
What do you think accounts for that? Lack of commitment, or we have the capacity, the resources to make it work in practice?
I refuse to believe that we lack the resources, because as I said in that article, education once again got the largest chunk of the budget. And that is a trend we have seen happening before. I think that there's a general disinterest in the special needs population. I think that there's a general disinterest in disability on the whole in our country. We don't take it as something seriously. We don't believe that, it's a large chunk of the population that would influence the politics of the country to any large extent. So therefore, it's a group that is totally marginalized. It's a group that is overlooked. Advocacy is not reaching the ears of the politicians. So I think generally, given our situation in Trinidad, we just don't see it as important. We still see the special needs population as individual children. One children here who can't get into school, another child who can't get into that school. We don't look at them as a group in totality. And we certainly don't look at the ones who have been home long before COVID. When COVID struck in 2020, we started talking about homeschooling and those children who couldn't go out to school. But even before that, we had a population of special needs children with autism, for example, who were not being educated. And we don't take their needs into consideration, despite the fact that we are supposed to be, that is a basic right of a child, the right to education. So it's just a general disinterest in that group. At all levels.
You said at all levels. So
yeah, at all levels, because one, at the level of policy, we do have, as I said before, we do have a lot of paper to show that our special needs population is catered for. We have a national child policy. We have, we're in the process of doing up we do have a national policy on persons of disability. So in paper, we have quite a lot, and we look good when you sit down and you analyze all the documents that we have to show all the various ways in which persons with special needs and disabilities are being included in our society. But those are not being translated into actively making a difference and putting those policies into effect. So there's a big disconnect between the theory and the practice, and that is the problem right there. And again, I said I don't think that it is so much that we don't have the resources. I think it's more an expansion of what we have so far, and I think it's very, very, very important that we pay a special emphasis on what we have and build on it. So for example, we do have a student support services. That division in the Ministry of Education is totally overwhelmed. Their number of staff is very low. We have many of the officers there who try very hard to help the parents, but they simply can't because they lack the resources and because they don't have enough persons to reach out to the amount of children that we have with special needs who have been asking for help. And that's one of the reasons why we have parents waiting 3 and 4 years to get a teacher's aid. So a simple thing as putting some of our a part of that budget into allocating the teacher's aid will be a big help. Another thing as simple as hiring special needs teacher. Every year we have students who are graduating from UTT with a degree in special needs education, but we are not hiring them. So on the one hand, principals are saying that their schools don't have teachers who are trained in special needs education, but that's because we are simply not hiring the ones who are graduating from UTT.
Is it deliberate, or what do you know to be standing in the way of making the best of people who pursue these avenues in education?
And that's the problem right there. We don't know what is happening because no ministry is not saying anything. We don't know if there's a policy in place that, only X amount of places are allocated for teachers who are qualified in special needs education. The ministry have not said anything. All we know is all these teachers who are coming out every year and they're not being given an opportunity to even apply because now the whole policy of applying to the Ministry of Education as a whole has been changed. So there's a kind of quiet that is coming out from the ministry when it comes to special needs education. You don't hear special needs education being mentioned much. And as a result, you have parents and caregivers and advocates who are just left there to fend for themselves and to figure out how to educate their children on their own with absolutely no help from the Ministry of Education.
And you say the emphasis is on, or the option, if you want to call it that at all, is that parents of such children have to find private schools for them.
Yes, so for the children who, we do have quite a few children who are able to function very well in a normal public school system. They are able to adjust to the requirements of being a normal children, that is sit as a desk and learn in the standardized method of teaching, standardized curriculum, and so on. Maybe some of them just need a teacher's aid to help them. So we have a situation where parents who have been waiting for teacher's aid, after a few years, they realize that the child is at a disadvantage. They just simply can't keep up and they're forced to take out their children. So there are those that we have. Many of them have resorted to hiring tutors to teach their children and to homeschooling. But then we have the others who cannot function without that extra help at all. And they need to be placed in schools that will adjust their teaching methods, make it more creative, basically teach them at their level of development, not a standardized curriculum. And those are the ones who have been parents have been looking for private schools, and the private schools are very expensive. 8 years ago, when I was trying to find schools for my nephew, we didn't have much, but now there have been a rise and increase in the number of private schools all over Trinidad. Many of them have new teachers. Many of them are students from UTT who have been graduating with a degree in special needs education and cannot find a job. So they have been opening up their own schools. And that is good in one sense that, you know, there are now more options available when it comes to the private school system. But at the same time, these schools are not regulated. That's one. The second thing is they're very expensive. So as I said there in the article, they range from $1,000 to $3,000 a month, and many parents simply cannot afford those.
Yeah, and if we were to understand it better, that the system should be that children with special needs, such as autism and so on, can be in the same classes with so-called normal children?
They should be. So that is what inclusive education is about. Inclusive education is that children, whatever their level of development and whatever their needs, should be included in a public school education with the extra help that they need to be able to function at their level. So it means, therefore, that a child who is very capable of sitting in a classroom should be there in a classroom with neurotypical children his or her age, totally included in all the classroom activities, but with the extra help, whether it be a teacher's aide or an individual educational plan, to help that child to learn at his or her own level. So that is what an inclusive education means. It doesn't mean putting children with special needs in a completely different school. It doesn't mean isolating them from the rest of the children in Trinidad and Tobago. It means including them at all levels in whatever way they can be included, with the assistance that they need to develop and to grow at their level within the public school system.
I just wanted to leave it on a quote that from the piece here. You said, if such children cannot sit still at a desk for long hours, cram and regurgitate large chunks of information, and excel at academics, then principals and teachers claim they cannot learn and they are duncy and so on.
Yes, and we get that a lot. We get parents who come to us and say, well, you know, I had to take my child out of the school because the teacher refused to teach a child. The teacher said that the child is disruptive. Or even sad, more sad than anything is the fact that they are told that these children cannot learn. That, you know, this child is not learning anything. It doesn't make sense sending them to school. And that is the stigma that that parents and caregivers also have to deal with. That within the education system, we still have principals, and we still have teachers who sincerely believe that children with special needs are incapable of learning, and that if you take them into your school, they will just disrupt your school, that you cannot focus on them because they just would not get the information that you are being taught. Recently we got a case where a parent was told by a principal that I can't take your child into my school because my school does very well in SCA and I don't want my results to drop. So that is the kind of things that parents are faced with regularly in our country, and that is absolutely ridiculous. You should never be told that your child cannot learn. Yep. I think we need to understand, the educators need to understand that regardless of a child's developmental level, every single child is capable of learning. You just need to be creative, and you just need to know how to teach them. And that is something that we are not seeing much. We do see it with the special needs teachers, the teachers who are trained in special needs education. So little by little, that mentality is changing as we have these new teachers who are trained in SPED coming out, but they are not being placed in the public school system. So the public school system is still at a disadvantage, and the public school system still discriminates against our special needs children.
Well, thanks for talking with us on this, and thanks for your advocacy on it. Dr. Radhika Mahesh, founder and director of the organization known as Support Autism Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye.
All right, so we will take a break. We head up to the news. Much more on the other side of that. Stay with us. This is AM Prime.
Here is your WESN News on the Hour. I am Marquis A. Here are the headlines. Suspected Venezuelan gang leader charged with human trafficking. Strategic security consultant advises business owners to not be complacent. Regional corporations to see increase in funding. And internationally, UN ups flood aid appeal as Pakistan enters second wave of death. Now for the details. Child trafficking charges has been laid against a suspected Venezuelan gang leader. A Venezuelan man appeared at the Chaguanas Magistrates Court on Monday. The accused was one of 4 Venezuelans intercepted in the Santa Flora district by officers division on Friday. Police detained 2 men and 2 women who allegedly had a firearm, ammunition, and contraband in their possession. Following his arrest, one of the suspects was handed over to the Special Investigations Task Force, which conducted investigations into alleged crimes of human trafficking. The man was then charged with trafficking in children, causing a child to become a prostitute, transporting a person for prostitution, and being a gang leader. Strategic security consultant Gavin Hira says there is a strong possibility that there will be an increase in crime approaching the busy end of the year period. Speaking on WESN's AM Prime, he advised business owners not to be complacent.
I would strongly recommend that business places look now at, recognizing, reviewing, going through how they do business, how they move their cash, what happens during the day. Because as I said, 95% of the times when there's a robbery or a carjacking or a house invasion, those perpetrators are in your environment, they're in your space, especially your business places. They will be in there checking out your place, staking it out, looking at the busy times, the non-busy times, when there's a whole set of cash, and they are using all sort of what I'll call surveillance on your business places even before they strike.
Local Government Minister Faris Al-Rawi is boasting an increase in funding within the regional corporation. He revealed some favoring statistics in the lower house on Monday.
A UNC Health Corporation, unless you want to talk about politics, is moving from 12 million to 30 million nearly. That is a 140% increase. Kuva Tabaki Talparu is moving from 13 million to nearly 30 million. That is a near 100% increase.
And internationally, the United Nations has increased its aid appeal for Pakistan, where more than 5 million people are facing a severe food crisis in the wake of recent catastrophic floods. Nearly 1,700 people, including more than 600 children, lost their lives, and a total of 33 million people were affected after record-breaking rains began lashing Pakistan in June. Julian Harness, the UN's humanitarian coordinator for the country, said on Monday that the world body was now seeking $816 million for flood relief efforts, up from its initial appeal from $160 million in August, when heavy rains and floods swept through much of Pakistan. With that news to the hour on WESN, I am Marquis Akers. Thanks for watching.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport, October 3rd to October 23rd, with replays on October 24th. It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
Saturday, November 5th, Shore Park, Tobago. It's Million Laughs Caribbean Comedy Commerce, the Mega Laugh Festival to end the Tobago Carnival season, featuring Tobago's finest in folklore and musical entertainment, together with some of the Caribbean's top comedians, Larry Joseph, Daryl the Saint Mendoza, Dolores, Alan the Entertainer, Handsome Sunshine, Mako Media, and more. Get your ticket specials available on Island E-Tickets and various outlets nationwide, or visit the Million Laughs handles for more info. It's Comedy Commerce in Tobago, a wee kind of commerce.
Welcome back to the program. Well, let's take you around the region a little bit now in the time we have available coming down. So we start in St. Lucia, where the Minister of Education there is addressing the growing concerns about student loitering in the capital city. As Castries, we have this report from HTS News Force.
Loitering among school children has become rampant over the last few months as school-aged children emerge from the claustrophobic cabin fever and apparently free their inhibitions. The Minister for Education reportedly met with school principals on Thursday and made a statement on loitering following what the Education Ministry says was an unfortunate stabbing incident involving 2 students. Educators have expressed concern about the growing trend of loitering and the safety of students during these times. Education Minister Sean Edward made a statement after witnessing loitering firsthand on the streets of Castries, with students in uniform milling around the capital instead of heading to their homes.
I was not in the mood for confrontation, and I do not believe it is my role as minister to patrol the streets of Castries asking children to go home. But as a responsible adult, even before minister, if I happen to walk on a situation where children need to be dispersed, I don't need to be minister to ask them to break up that group and find your way home.
Minister Edward contends that it will take all of society working in unison to solve the resurgence of this perennial social issue. He appealed to parents in particular to ensure that students are at home at a decent time.
The Ministry of Education or the minister on his own cannot solve that loitering problem. It calls for a multi-pronged approach. Principals have a role. Ministry officials have a role. The police, they too have a role. And ultimately, the parents have a role. I have a son. And if you are told that school dismisses at 3 o'clock, you need to be home by 4:30, you have to be accountable to me at 5 o'clock because you're not home at 4:30.
Edward concedes that the flare-up in loitering cultures bears the hallmarks of the continued fraying of the bedrock of societal mores wrought by the decades-long social challenges.
There are too many students loitering the streets, and you see them at 7 o'clock in the night in uniform, and it's as if they don't have a home to go to. And this is what you get when the social fabric of your society begins to disintegrate. Remember the baby boom? The baby boom years, when children were having children, and when social policy advocates were talking about the problems you can have down the road when you have children parenting children, some persons thought that they were talking nonsense. I'm afraid today that is some of what we are paying for.
Educators are worried that these unsupervised students left to their devices when the school bell rings could result in unsafe behavior, which can in turn compound the problems associated with possible hazards and injuries. Parents are being called upon to make sure their children follow through and are back at home at the appointed time when school is dismissed.
And to Guyana now, where the government there is preparing to launch its first bid round for offshore exploration and production of some hydrocarbon blocks. We have a report from HTS News, from News Source Guyana.
The government of Guyana announced today that it is preparing to launch its first bidding round for offshore exploration and production of hydrocarbon blocks. The government in a statement said Cabinet is finalizing the new fiscal terms and conditions, which will allow for the country to gain the maximum economic benefits as they continue to advance the exploration and development of Guyana offshore blocks. The 2022 bidding round, which is expected to be officially launched soon and will be open for several months, will give interested companies sufficient time to prepare their competitive packages and bid to win the available acreages offshore, which will be done in an open and transparent manner, the statement said. Since the discovery of Liza in 2015, the Guyana offshore basin has seen unprecedented development, with Guyana setting a new paradigm for expeditious development of oil and gas resources. With the upcoming bidding round, the government of Guyana says it expects to chart a new path as the Guyana offshore areas emerge as a potential super basin with over 11 billion barrels of oil equivalent. And discovered to date, with substantial exploration activities ongoing, the government said the figure is expected to increase significantly. The cabinet is concluding a definitive terms of reference for the competitive licensing round, which will foster a conducive investment environment while maximizing value for the people of Guyana, the statement said.
So we go to Jamaica now, where there's been a fatal stabbing of a child that occurred at the Kingston Technical High School. We have this report from the JBN network.
Vanessa Clark, mother of Michigan Campbell, the grade 11 Kingston Technical High School student who was stabbed to death by another pupil at her school on Thursday, was inconsolable when police handed her a Ziploc bag on Friday containing her daughter's cell phone and other personal items. Clark squeezed the bag tightly in both hands, then closed her eyes as she lifted it to her chin and sobbed profusely. Police personnel from the Kingston Central Division, as well as the Kingston East Community Safety and Security Branch, visited Clark at home in 9 Miles in Bull Bay, St. Andrew, to offer emotional support. But no amount of comforting words seemed to be able to ease the pain caused by the loss of Clark's beloved baby. The female student, who is accused of the schoolyard murder, was taken into police custody Thursday evening. "She grabbed my baby and my baby couldn't do nothing. She grabbed her and stab her," Clark said, as she recalled the images from video footage of the incident. "Me don't know what me I go do without her. Me can't do without her." As if to add salt to her wounds, Clark said her cell phone has been ringing off the hook with people who have been relaying social media comments to her regarding the incident. "People keep calling me and tell me what them say on social media. The problem I have with social media is the people saying that my daughter was fighting over a man. My baby was not interested in anything like that," she insisted. "Don't follow social media. What I want you to do is get something warm in your stomach and stay strong. Don't go on social media and watch what the people are saying. You know your child. The Dean of Discipline at our school said he lost one of his good students, so don't pay them any mind," said one of the cops. Residents of Bull Bay shared good memories ahead of Campbell and condemned their murder, labeling it a wicked act. Phyllis Rowe, an elderly woman in the community, recalled that Campbell was a nice girl. "She walked past every man to go to school and she's quiet. I don't know her as any worry and I can't tell you anything bad about her. It surprised me if you know that she got killed," Rowe said. And a male resident said he had always admired how much care and compassion she showed to her younger siblings, whether or not her mother was present. "She always take good care of her little sister and brother them." Thursday's incident badly impacted the student turnout on Friday. The school, assisted by the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, flooded the institution with grief counselors to provide support for the children, especially the classmates and close friends of Campbell. "Tell me where she dey. Show me her," a classmate of Campbell said Friday morning as she cried. The school's principal, Moulton Campbell, denied that the institution has a security challenge, pointing out that the students are searched when they arrive at school. However, Campbell said he'll be working with other stakeholders to beef up security. This is a very large campus, and of course there are students from the area. There are outside external influences, but of course we're working with the police and the security companies we have hired, and they will do a full review. They'll guide us as to what else we can put in place to ensure that our school is more secure.
We'll be back in a moment. Stay with us.
In a hurry, check those guys' hardware. 42 Front Street, Woodbrook. Call 750-7244. Open Monday to Saturday, 8 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. Sundays and public holidays at 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m.
Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport. October 3rd to October 23rd, with replays on October 24th. It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive. What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing on.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Ball?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Well, continuing our range around the region, we go to a report from the Grenada Information Service where they say the government there has approved the adjustment of freight in the calculation of duties and taxes on imported goods, including imported food, to alleviate the impact of external shocks on the population.
As part of the government's efforts to alleviate the impact of external shocks on the Grenadian population, Cabinet has approved the adjustment of freight in the calculation of duties and taxes on imported goods to reflect 2019 freight cost. The freight cap will be applied to the importation of all goods landed in Grenada during the period October 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023. The implementation of the cap will see only minor changes in the current process of customs brokers and importers who will follow existing processes in preparing the customs declaration. For commercial imports, there will be a requirement to identify freight actually paid on the valuation note of the customs declaration. In the case of non-commercial imports, agents will input actual freight paid in the preparation of the Simplified Administrative Document, SAD. The customs computerized system, Asikuda will make the necessary adjustments and apply the reduced freight for the calculation of duties and taxes. All other clearance processes remain the same. Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, Mike Sylvester, says this will be an ongoing process, but he expects a seamless transition.
Government is supporting or helping to mitigate the impact by really subsidizing the prices of those goods so that when it gets to the shelf, it would be a lot cheaper than it would have otherwise been. And so that is really the effect of the policy. The comptroller and his team, as the comptroller of customs and his team, would have been would have had extensive consultations with the agents and brokers and importers and so on. And so this will allow them to be able to implement the measure with as little disruption as possible. The Ministry of Finance will continue to provide public relations on this matter, and so we will continue to share information with the public. We'll continue to consult relevant stakeholders to ensure that the measure is implemented successfully and without any issues or without any hiccups. If there are, we will try to resolve them, of course, as quickly as possible. And if there is any need to amend the policy, we will take that back to Cabinet. Of course, it's an opportunity for us to evaluate how things unfold, and I'm sure that once there are issues, or once there are ways and means and so on to improve on that policy, those, of course, would be considered and implemented.
The public is reminded of the legal obligations to make true and correct declarations.
We also have this report from CBC News Night in Barbados, in which it is said that the Prime Minister there, Mia Mottley, is promising to continue to work to develop that country's tourism industry.
Barbados remains heavily reliant on the tourism industry for its economic prospects, and as such, it will continue work to develop the sector. This from Prime Minister Mia Mottley as she was addressing the St. James Speaks Forum at the Darrell Jordan Secondary School last night. One resident who contributed said he heard rumors of plans to get rid of the existing properties along the seaside stretch in Whole Town to make way for tourism development and at the same time kill the Whole Town Festival, and asked the Prime Minister to respond. Well, Ms. Mottley first assured the resident nothing would threaten the existence of the annual festival, and while she did not confirm or deny plans to build out the area, she said the island's tourism product is desperately in need of a revival.
All this government has done is that we have put out an advertisement for both here, and we did it elsewhere in Oysters, but we said we're doing one at a time now. And to move what is civic facilities that have a limited number of jobs that are being provided for the police, for the librarians, for the persons who work in that civic center. If we move it across off of the beach, they still have the jobs, do they?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. These services are still immediately available to anybody walking on the coast?
Yeah.
Okay. And that there is nothing in Barbados called a private beach?
The Prime Minister says if the decision is made, the benefits will be significant.
At the end of the day, if we can put a facility now on that same spot, while moving the civic center that preserves the number of jobs that we have, and we can put a facility on that spot that can give us opportunity for hundreds of jobs, not to mention then the expanded work for the truckmen who got to deliver all the foods and the goods, not to mention the expanded sales for all the merchants who got to sell, not to mention the NCC approved licensed vendors who will now have a different category of persons out there to be able to sell to.
And just before we go, just tell you to watch this as we do at this point in the program. UK-based Trinidadian Rodel Solozano, known as Trini Boy Juicy, performs his original soca hit Bottle Overhead in week 5 of the International Talent Contest, The Voice UK. Watch this.
I don't mean to be so rude, darling. We don't really watch face. Now you have your breakfast and drinking. We don't know how everything tastes. But you just buy body bar. We have it here by in case. So if you feel it's a problem, well, tonight you will know your place. Why? Because it could be water. Hey, it could be rum. It could be energy. Everything going down. Cause the bottles over my head. Over my head. And I'm up to the cold is over we head, over we head. Now watch you girl them falls out the tipping. What you seen? Cause when the bottle in my hand it feeling most like a beam. If you have no vibes, go home with your tea. Why? Cause it could be water, start to jump. It could be rum. What we say? It could be Hennessy. Everything going. Jump up, jump up. It could be water. What we say? It could be Hennessy. Everything going down. Cause 2 bottles over me head, over me head. And I'm bouncing through the crowd. It's over me. It's over me. Put your hands in the air. Start to wave. Start to wave. Start to wave. Start to wave. So we tell them. On the ground like.
Also, let's just tell you what's on the front pages of these newspapers that we promote here in each edition of the program. In Newsday Tobago, the top story, the feasibility study is being conducted to redevelop this town of Scarborough as the capital in Tobago. And on the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday, 4 bandits have been shot dead as police officers thwart a hold-up at a businessman's home. That's what it looks like there. And some sporting news on the back page here. Well, that's our broadcast in this edition of the program. We thank you for watching. We tell you can get in touch with us here at AM Prime at WESNCC on all the social media platforms. You could send your emails to amprime@wesncc.com. That will do it for us for this edition. Of course, coming up, today's edition of Talking Point with Shah and Small, the news at the top of the hour. Enjoy the rest of the day. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.